Welcome back to Scrollies. We're here with another episode. Of course, I am Team Ratnado. There is more of us. You're welcome into the Ratnado. But my co-host...
Hey, it's Spook Cobbler.
Spook Cobbler? Wait, this is a change. When did this happen?
What? I said Squat Cobbler.
No.
Are you okay, Rat?
Yeah.
Are you hearing things?
No, I could have... no, definitely not. I could have swore you said something else.
Yeah, listen, you heard Squat Cobbler, right? That's what I said.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I guess everything's feeling a little spookier. The weather's gone down a little bit, and I don't know, man. Things have just changed. In fact, I think even the intro song was a little bit scarier than normal. Do you hear this, Squat Cobbler? What's going on?
I'm getting goosebumps right now. I think some subconscious tingle is going down my spine. I don't like it. Let's move on with the introductions, because this is getting a little heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, there's somebody who I'm glad that you all know exists, and you all need to know. In fact, our guest today, the fiancé, soon to be more of our legal department, aka Chunky Cat, welcome to the podcast to talk about spooky games, an expert, the most accomplished spooky games player that I know, Glasses Guy. Welcome.
Woo!
Thanks so much, guys. Love finally being part of the podcast.
Yeah, welcome. I know we were talking about this. Spot and I were talking to this. I think I mentioned to Chunky Cat like a few months ago. I'm like, what if? Do you think Glasses Guy would be down for this? And I kind of thought you might be like, you know what? I'm busy. I'm busy playing my spooky games. I'm busy being professional as well. Thanks for being here.
Of course, yeah. You should have asked sooner. I would have come on as soon as you asked.
I, for one, never doubted Glasses Guy. Not only is he an actual glasses wearer, but he's also an actual Metroid Dread player, Cat. So all of my respect has been reallocated to Glasses Guy in the weeks after this news was revealed to me that Cat never in fact played Metroid Dread.
Did you know about this? That Chunky Cat was going around claiming she played games when, I mean, in a way, sure, but she's just watching you?
I actually didn't know that. I mean, I've played plenty of games where she was just kind of on the sidelines. I had no idea she was taking credit for them, to be honest. Like, being dead honest, I had no idea. It doesn't really surprise me, but I didn't know, so this is news to me.
Well, all the secrets are coming out here on Scrollies Live, folks. We won't dare try and follow the fallout of this revelation, but if just keep an eye on the Discord. I'm sure whatever comes about will be mentioned there.
Yeah, no, it's funny, especially the Metroid Dread thing. I had no idea because I still haven't played it. But Chunky Cat comes on, she's like, yeah, Squat, I beat it in like 9 or 10 hours or something like that. And I was like, wow, that's really crazy. I would never suspect Chunky Cat, number one, to play Metroid, number two, to be that good at it.
Shortly after finding this out, I went back and I looked at some of the recordings of that stream when I played Metroid Dread Blind last year, and the whole time I was just like, complimenting Cat, like, wow, you're already like to this part, man, you're so good at this game. You're like ahead of me. You beat the final boss. Was he hard? And I was like asking her for tips on the final boss, and she's like, oh, there's no way you're gonna beat him. Like, he's really hard. I'm like, all right. So little did I know. I was actually taking advice from Glasses Guy's playthrough, observed by one Chunky Cat. So as it goes.
Yeah, I don't even know if Chunky Cat really has any experience with Metroid or even knows what Metroid is if I hadn't come into the picture. So big revelation to me for sure.
We thank you for giving her the ability to join in conversations now as well, because she'll be like, oh yeah, I know about Silent Hill 2. I know about, all these different games. And I'm like, I thought you just played Skyrim and Breath of the Wild. We also have to address the Link's Awakening controversy at some point.
Link's Awakening controversy. I'm new to that one as well.
It seems like Glasses Guy is only told what Cat wants him to be told. So we could go on and on, just revealing more and more deep dark secrets from the Discord. But I think it's time we got to the conversation at hand. What do you think, Ratnado?
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll talk offline about the Link's Awakening controversy, but let's just say...
We'll fill him in on all the details.
Chunky Cat has a bad opinion, let's just say that. Of course, our topic today, we have somebody here who enjoys spooky games, is really great at them, has great recommendations, and who I've really, honestly, up to this point, haven't had a chance to discuss at length some of the things like my favorite spooky games, Silent Hill 2. Glasses Guy, tell us, what is your experience with spooky games? What do you like about them?
So I'd say I came to the genre actually probably a little later than most, right? Most of the scary games I played, we had mentioned previously talking about, specifically Silent Hill 2. Obviously, there are many others. Silent Hill 2 is just a classic that I know, all of us love. But by the time I ever played Silent Hill 2, or really, most classic spooky games, they've been out forever. I definitely was not somebody who played it, back in the 90s or early 2000s. One, because I probably wouldn't have been allowed to play them. I had pretty strict parents. But I just probably wouldn't even have been interested, right? So I came to the genre a lot later. We mentioned talking about, first spooky games. I would say the first series I was even introduced happened to be, Silent Hill. Specifically the second one, play the other ones. Most of the other oones, shortly following, right, once I got hooked. But I would say my start really was specifically in the Silent Hill series. In some way, that's a good thing because it's, in my opinion, one of the best, survival horror genre games out there. In some way, it's also maybe a bad thing because it's you could look at it and say it's kind of starting from the top, because a lot of scary games aren't as good, aren't as classic as the Silent Hill series.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, too, it's definitely like one of those things now where when you look back on it, even the whole genre, I think, like you said, Silent Hill was an offshoot. It was this thing where they went and they said, we're going to make basically a blockbuster movie, or they're going to try to anyways. And the way that came out was like very unique, very different from like, I think even what a lot of other games were doing at the time. Squat Cobbler, do you have much like horror, survival horror, any types of those games experience either?
Not really. I've played a couple. Usually just the popular ones at the time. I haven't really done that in a while, like probably not since high school did I really get into any specific, like, big. In fact, I think, like, I was kind of starting to fall out of it by the time Five Nights at Freddy's came out, so that kind of goes to show it's been a while. But, when I was a kid, same as Glasses Guy, I didn't really have, like, much opportunity nor desire to really play them. I was a scaredy cat. In fact, the most terrifying games experience I've ever had, and never will have, was my first night in Minecraft. Hearing the zombies around me, I built a little dirt hut around myself, and I hunkered down in it and hoped that daytime would come, so they would all go away. But never since then has anything quite gotten under my skin. At the same time, though, I recognize that a lot of these long-running series, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, even Castlevania to a lesser extent, is well-regarded horror franchises, and yet I think a lot of the notable scary games people are playing now don't really come from those established names. They're more kind of indie projects or one-offs that just kind of get developed by a single person with a vision, or by a big visionary developer that's well regarded, like PT by Kojima.
Ooh, 100%. I think kind of like what you're both talking about is just like how kind of weird, and I think even in the film sense of how horror games are kind of difficult to get out there, because it's not like always the biggest audience, but I find like some of the most like provoking things, the like most interesting things come from those. Like, for example, one of my first scary games was my older brother, Sports Game Guy, aka Teo Dafa, shout out, playing Resident Evil. And I remember I was sitting there in the family room, sitting on the couch, like playing with an action figure. And suddenly I hear like this spooky music and there's people running and the scary stuff. And then he gets to that part in Resident Evil right at the beginning where you go into one of the rooms and this zombie is like chowing down on somebody, slowly turns around. I mean, oh my gosh, that scarred me. Absolutely scarred me. And I remember from then on out just being like terrified of zombies, which would later turn into a love for zombies, even though I'm not like the biggest Resident Evil fan anymore. And PlayStation really seemed to me kind of like the birth of horror, because I also remember Sports Game Guy playing like Silent Hill and just like some really crazy experiences, especially as like a kid who was probably way too young. But you're talking a little bit about kind of this indie scene and so on and so forth. Glasses Guy, how do you feel about this in kind of like now where you've had a chance to play the greats, and how do you get your scary game, your horror game fixed now?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I'd actually never really thought about the road that the horror genre is really taken, but you're absolutely right. You look at Silent Hill and it's Konami, classic game company, not even necessarily known for horror, but just everyone knows Konami from old games, old NES, SNES games, whatnot, whatever they did back in the 90s. But nowadays, yeah, it definitely is kind of these one-off. It's this French Canadian company, and they're only known for 2 games, and the games are $15 or $20 on online store or whatever, and that's all they ever do, or they just do a couple of things, whatever. They're not known as these big companies. I would say that, I'm definitely more of a console guy, just because I never really owned a PC, even though in some ways PCs are better for kind of these indie games. I would say, I got to wait for for these indie games to come out. They're just one-off. A lot of them are great. A lot of them aren't. It really is hit or miss. And I really do wish that we could go back to the days where, we had these big publishers that were creating these games that you kind of knew were going to be good, as opposed to this kind of hit or miss, only maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 actually are good.
Yeah. Is there a specific aspect of that? Because you have stuff like even like action and so on, like Resident Evil. That's kind of what that's become a little bit. And so it seems like maybe you tend to stay away from things like that. Like
kind of like action horror games?
Yeah.
Yeah, Resident Evil has kind of taken that. Just talking about Resident Evil in particular has kind of taken that turn where you talk about Resident Evil 1, and you're absolutely right. It really was more of a horror first. There was action, but it was really clunky, and part of that was probably just due to the fact it was on PlayStation 1. But it really was horror first. And then you get to Resident Evil 4 and 5, and it really kind of seems more of an action game. And I'm not sure if that means because those games, they sell better, or they're kind of liked by a more general audience, as opposed to maybe a more cult audience who really prefers the horror. Maybe those games just don't sell as well. I would say that, at this point, I kind of take anything I can get. As far as if it's horror, I'll give it a shot. But, there's nothing like it being, 11 or 12 at night, sitting in bed, hands sweating, really getting that survival horror, feeling, as opposed to the action games. But most games, unfortunately, aren't like that anymore.
That's a mood for sure. Yeah. I feel that. I tend to sway a little more to the action horror games if I do play them, like Castlevania. I haven't played a ton of that series, but I really like the ones that I do, and those aren't scary in any sense to me. Like, I think monsters are cool. I don't think they're scary. So definitely more of action games with kind of a gothic atmosphere and setting than actual like scary horror to me. But I feel like you're kind of going to get 3 different responses from a horror game, or at least like a horror situation. And I feel like this kind of goes for movies, this goes for haunted houses, or whatever kind of entertainment horror you want to indulge in. But the easiest and the most common is going to be shock, which is like, oh, surprise, something goes boo, and you jump because you weren't expecting it. The second one's a little harder to pull off, and that's suspense or dread, or just building that tension where something's going to happen, you don't know when it's going to happen, you're just waiting, and then maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but that lingering, just just give me a release, like this is horrible, this is uncomfortable, and that's it takes a craftsmanship to make that actually work and pay off for you. The third, I don't think is really possible in most forms of entertainment, and that's terror, which is where it makes you feel for your life. But I feel like that's the third type of horror. Some people get really, really immersed in it, and they might actually feel like they're in danger, so they have that response. But I've never, aside from that one night in Minecraft, I've never once feared for my life playing a video game.
Kind of what you're saying too is like, and I get this a lot because like Outlast, I played that, remember, I didn't quite get to the end. I thought Outlast was really good. Just as like a stock, like big name, everybody knows about it. I really enjoyed the first 2 or 3 hours, or the first beginning, because there was so much tension, there was so much atmosphere, and it was just like so much. And then they wore out the jump scares, and that's I totally feel. And so I didn't even get to the end because I was just like, this is just kind of like the same thing over and over, and I just feel inconvenienced. Yeah,
you start expecting it, it gets more annoying than it's actually like giving you that shock or that scare or, you know, what you're going in looking for. I totally understand that. I think it's overplayed. I think a well-earned jump scare is fine. In fact, it's good if it's like in a, you know, suitable moment where you're really comfortable, you're not expecting anything to happen at all, and then suddenly boom. But it's got to be real sparse, otherwise it will very quickly overstay its welcome. So I totally agree.
You played Outlast, right, Glasses Guy?
Absolutely have. I played the first one, played the DLC Whistleblower, and also played the second one, right? And it's funny, I played them all completely. I made it through all of them. I wouldn't say that I 100% disagree with you, at least as far as, you know, the first one is concerned. Heard a lot about it. It is, surprisingly enough, you did talk about kind of like a stock horror game. It is actually, you know, an indie thing. I do believe it's from a company made up in Montreal. They've only made, you know, a couple of games. One of them being Outlast, probably what they're known for the most. But yeah, in the beginning it was great. You know, starting off the first 5 minutes, it was immediately like, oh crap, this is scary. Tension, dread. You know, I personally, this may be a little bit of a hot take, but I kind of think that you can't really have a horror game or a horror movie without some sort of jump scares. It's like, what are you really afraid of if there's not some sort of surprise, right? Obviously, your life isn't really in danger, but there is there has to be some sort of thing that you are afraid of. It doesn't mean it has to be overused or, done over and over, kind of like it is in Outlast. In fact, that was kind of something that the second one got a lot of flack for, which I know you never played, but basically it was just over and over the same exact thing. You played it for, you know, probably even before the first half, you're like, okay, we get it. They just, with the AI or whatever, they just made it in a way to where you could never hide. They would always catch you, and they would always, you know, find out where you were, to the point where you're like, okay, you know, this is no longer really all that fun. The first one was great, until you kind of just figured it out yourself, as far as like, I'm going to go here. Okay, yeah, I see what's going to happen here. And yeah, okay, I can't hide for here long, you know, whatever. But still, overall, a pretty solid horror game, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think that brings up, like, that's exactly what it is. And what that brings up to me is, like, that's one reason I think I have a lot of problems with scary games. It's very hard for a game to sit there and be like, hey, we're going to make this a really compelling and fun experience for the player. Because that's kind of at odds of being like, we want you to be terrified and scared, but it should also be fun in some way. And I find so many of them are just like, the answer is we're going to depower you, make you feel as helpless as possible. And it's like, well, just make a movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other conversation right there. But I think you have to make it an interactive, immersive experience to really justify it being a horror game and not a horror visual novel experience.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of them tend to as well. Yeah. Glasses Guy, what do you feel like typical horror gamers want to get out of a game when they go into it? Is it does it kind of depend on what you're feeling in the moment? Could you maybe pick from a sparse selection, or do you feel like maybe you come in with some common desires of, okay, you know, I'm kind of hoping to get this out of this, hoping to, you know, maybe experience this feeling?
Yeah, I think horror games have kind of lost their way a little bit. I do think that they are kind of making a comeback. It almost seems like they were really popular back in the day, and then they kind of died off, and now it's sort of like, hey, wait a minute, there is actually a market for this. There are actually people who do like this and are asking for remakes of Silent Hills, and the latest Resident Evil 7 and 8. But a little more horror focused, have actually done pretty well. I really think it does come back to that. I'm not going back on what I just said earlier about, you know, jump scares. Again, I do think jump scares are, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, part of a horror game. There has to be some sort of thing that you're afraid of, whether it be being killed or jumping out at you, whatever. Yeah. But I definitely do think, you know, it can't be only jump scares. And I think, you know, it really is that atmosphere, that whole feeling of, you know, dread and I guess I wouldn't say terror, because that was the third one. You said it's kind of impossible to recreate in games, which I agree. But I really think that more and more horror games I see now, even if they're not too heavy on the jump scares, which again I think is necessary, they're really heavy on atmosphere. So that the whole experience, you picture yourself in that situation, and you become scared, right? You know, you go to bed and you have nightmares about it because you think, well, if I was in this situation, I would be, you know, it'd be terrible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some of the best horror, like, I mean, well, I won't talk about movies, but just even video games, the ones that are the best to me, or the ones that really get with me, are the ones that are, like, you know, kind of realistic and real life in a way. Especially, I mean, they can have supernatural elements, and I think that a jump scare is great in the moment. There's even, like, again, like I mentioned before too, there is the perfect example of for me, a 10 out of 10 horror game, which is Silent Hill 2, because it does such a good job of creating an atmosphere. Everything about it, when they create it, it's this Japanese company that tried as close as they could to create, here's Heartland America. You've got a burger shop. You've got the Hoa Hospital. You've got all these things that are like so mundane, but yet the whole like blanket of terror that goes on top of it, and the fact that it's a psychological horror to me is like just what I love so much about it. And every year there's a playthrough by the Super Best Friends that I watch every single fall, every single October, because it always gets me in the mood. But yeah, I could talk about Silent Hill 2 forever. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I just now thought of a theory. I may be totally off base, but I'm gonna speak my mind. I've never shied away from that before. My hot takes. I think the current state of horror gaming has one thing to blame or thank, for its popularity, but also for its current state and quality. I think reaction video streamers. I think that whole movement, that whole explosion in viewers online is I think the games are being tailored to that now, because I think secondhand scaries, that's a thing. People don't really, they may not be super inclined to play a horror game themselves, but they're fine watching someone else get scared playing them, and maybe that gives them a portion of that same feeling. So I feel like a lot of streamers now, especially horror streamers, and I'm certainly not one of these. Catt asked me to play Visage last year and Fatal Frame 2, and neither one scared me very much. And she made a pretty good point. I think a part of that was because I had lights in my face. I was very aware of the chat, and there's just a lot else on my mind besides, I'm really like invested in this world and playing through this world and avoiding all the spookies. But I think a lot of people can get into that mind space when they're playing. I'm just not one of them. And when they can, and when they get freaked out by something like a jump scare or like a really scary moment, for one, that's a really good highlight. It's a really good clip, and I think the more of those you have, the more popular your game is going to be on that type of platform. So again, could be totally off base. That's my theory as to why they are the way they are right now.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. One thing I really love about horror games is, you ever you could play like forget horror games. You could be playing something and maybe there's like a boss or whatever, and it's super hard to beat, and everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, it took me forever. It took me 10 hours to level up and grind or whatever, beat it." Finally, you beat it, and you get that sense of accomplishment. It's it's just a game, but you get that sense of like, "Oh, I finally did it." That's how I feel like a really good horror game is. Just playing the game, right?
Yeah.
Silent Hill 2, I'm like, yeah, I got through the hospital. That was like a huge freaking deal, right? And it, even though it wasn't necessarily a specific boss fight or anything, it was just, just getting in and out to me was like kind of a boss in itself, right? And having that feeling of accomplishment, like, yes, I beat that. I love watching people kind of do it themselves, because okay, when he walks in here, something's going to pop out, or I know that he's going to turn around and find this or whatnot after you've conquered it. Or I guess I've never watched somebody play a horror game that I hadn't played myself. So I guess I can understand being a little bit too afraid to do it yourself and then watching somebody else, because it's like kind of gives you a buffer. I always do it after 100% of the time. Play it, conquer it, and then watch somebody else do it to kind of see their reaction, see how they handle it.
Yeah.
And the louder the scream, the better, right?
Yeah.
Is that a thing for you? I mean, when you play, is that we know that Chunky Catt there, she's usually there, probably playing Skyrim on Switch or something like that. Is that, does she get scared as well? Does that change it for you? Is there a preference to like, I kind of want to be alone in a dark room?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, a lot of the horror games that I do play, she is there. I know you say kind of jokingly playing Skyrim on Switch, but that's not really 100% false. It doesn't have to be Skyrim. It could be something else, or it could even just be on a phone or whatnot.
Yeah.
But I would say there's nothing like playing it, by yourself and really getting into, just kind of getting into that world. I mean, just with video games in general, it doesn't have to necessarily be a horror game, but I just find personally that horror games are just more of an experience than, if you're playing, we'll say Tetris or something, where there isn't really anything you can escape into. It's probably an extreme example, but you get the point. By yourself late at night, how I feel like you're supposed to play it, whatever that means.
That makes a lot of sense. I think I've kind of figured out what I love most about a video game, a scary game, is the atmosphere. Like, again, like we were talking about Silent Hill 2, I think it's just so unique. It does so much. But there's a lot of other games, and I don't know if you would consider them horror games. They might just be survival games. But I brought up The Sinking City last time, which is like an eldritch horror kind of tale. And it's like 1920s, in like this Massachusetts city. But it's got this heavy feeling, and it could be scary. To me, there's like a tiered level of that where there are things like Scott Cobbler saying, "Oh, I played Minecraft and the zombies outside scared me." That's probably a product of like your time, your experience, your age, because like that's happened to me, but I've never felt, I guess, terror at something like that, because to me it's not the not quite the setting, if that makes sense. But I mean, I understand it. I could see a younger person being like, "This is terrifying."
I was being a little jokey about that, but
okay.
I may have experienced. I don't know. I may have been really scared at younger points in my life,
Sure.
playing certain titles. Even some of my favorites, as we know, have those moments of absolute trauma-inducing terror.
Get out.
Oh, it was in our contract. We would never have that on Scrollies Sqadnado. What the heck?
I want to ask Glasses Guy, if you had to pick something for somebody to play just to experience who maybe has never really played them before or felt like, they're a little bit too scary for me, what would you suggest someone tries out?
It's a great question. I think the first one that actually comes to mind is actually not an old horror game. I personally find it terrifying. Not everybody would necessarily... Well, I think most people who play it should find it scary, but, I don't think it's necessarily billed as a horror first game to some people. But that's definitely Alien Isolation, a game that came out in 2014. You guys familiar?
Yes.
It was the one game Esquire ever streamed for an hour.
And your guys' opinion is what?
I would agree. I think in a bare sense of just gives you what you are talking about out of getting out of a horror game. It's pretty, not story light, but it's kind of like, okay, here you are, here's the situation, here's your mechanics, and good luck. And that in itself is kind of terrifying to me, of just like, okay, I guess I'll just figure it out on the go.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously adjust, difficulties to make it easier, harder for yourself. It's not bloody, it's not gory. There is that suspense. I've heard even people say that it's not a horror game at all. It's just more of suspense, or it's just not. It's kind of like whatever you want to classify. That's the first one that comes to my mind. Yeah. Obviously, there are other ones. I personally, and this is something I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but it is my opinion. I think at some point, the further you go back, particularly with horror, like if you're talking, Silent Hill 1 or whatnot. Like when I played Silent Hill 1, not that I didn't like it, but it's kind of to the point where the graphics are kind of bothering me in terms of like, okay, this looks a little kind of cheesy. It doesn't really scare me as much anymore. So in my personal opinion, you have to kind of be somewhat recent so that, the graphics and the gameplay that you're used to is still kind of there. There's PC games from the 90s that people say, oh, at the time it was so scary, but now it's just completely outdated. It's not really scary anymore.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have to stay somewhat recent, and that's the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Resident Evil 2 remake?
I liked it. I thought it was quite good. Changing from that, at the time, I'm not sure if this is what they specifically went for the horror effect, or if it was just, PlayStation 1. This is all they could do at the time. But changing from that, like fixed camera, you walk into a different room and all of a sudden the camera is like from the opposite end and you're pushing up, but because you come in, it makes you turn left or,
terrible.
or whatever. And then, you talked about Resident Evil 1, where you walk into, it's like one of the first scenes, you walk into a room and there's like a zombie there who's munching on something, and that's the first time you have to like use your gun, and it's terrifying. And part of it being terrifying is the fact that you're like, where do I go? Where do I shoot? And it's like, I don't know if that's specifically what they were going for, if that was just the technology at the time. Anyway, going back to Resident Evil 2, changing from that fixed camera thing to over the shoulder, I think it goes from like, it brings it more up to date. I don't know if a game would even work nowadays with that fixed camera, even though it's more frustrating and potentially creates more suspense. I just think it's outdated. I don't think it's like retro or anything. So I thought it was great. And I think that it's not like you had to play the original to appreciate it. And of course, it's not a shot for shot remake. It's obviously a little bit different. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was pretty scary, but also was pretty actiony. It's not like 4 or 5 or 6 where it really just is kind of action.
Yeah.
I guess it technically fits in horror because there's zombies and death and gore and blood, but it's not really scary. This one actually was still pretty scary, but also was pretty action. You don't feel overpowered necessarily, but you still have some ability to defend yourself.
All right, so I heard him go from I like it to it's great to it's fantastic. That's good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
The third one, different story.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I only asked because I haven't played any Resident Evil. I've just heard that's the one to jump into, the remake specifically, if you're looking to get into that series. And we said that's a little more actiony than it is like straight horror, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
But still pretty horror.
yeah. Shout out Plaidman and Feels Geoman have both talked really highly of that game.
Interesting.
So
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before, and I have to stick to my guns. I can't pretend to like it just because Glasses Guy is here. I'm not a huge Resident Evil fan. I've over the years, I've kind of just decided, like, oh man, it's really not my thing. But I did get the Resident Evil 2 remake, and everything I did play, I played for like the first 2 hours or something. And it's a great game, and who knows, maybe one day I'll go back. It's not like 7 and 8 weren't as interesting to me. I think the first person to me is, I get why people do that. I get how that's a little more scary, but third person, I just really love third person stuff, and like it goes back to my love of kind of just saying like that, or like PlayStation 1 time, and yeah, I don't know. Glasses Guy. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about within scary games? What you love about them?
Yeah, I think that just the biggest thing with scary games is I feel like because, contrary to first-person shooters or even maybe sports games where we're a little bit limited and, there's not always... I feel like if you're looking for a first-person shooter, from my point of view, it seems like you could almost just play them infinitely. Like, find one right now, play it, beat it. Find another one, play it and beat it. Find another one, play it and beat it. And there's always going to be other new ones coming out. I feel like with horror at some point, you kind of run out of all the good ones. There's not always a new one. I always shoot for obviously the scariest game possible. But the problem with that is that you kind of raise the bar now. Yeah. Right. And then now you need to find something that's scary. So at this point, I'm kind of like, what is there next to play? I'm always looking for that latest fix, like some kind of horror game junkie. But the thing I like about it is the fact that I feel like it introduces me into other games that I may otherwise not really play, right? So go back to Silent Hill 2, and one of the great things about Silent Hill 2 is the atmosphere. Like, even if you just take away the horror, just the atmosphere, the way you feel. Well, you talked about some game I actually wasn't familiar with.
Oh, The Sinking City, yeah.
Is that a horror game, or is it just a...
It's like an eldritch horror, like detective type thing, so it's got a little bit.
Okay, but you say that, and maybe, perhaps, maybe it's not really a horror game, but it has, great atmosphere. I can say, hey, wait, I've played a lot of these games. I understand the importance of atmosphere. Before I started playing horror games, if somebody had said, "Oh, it has great atmosphere," I'd be like, "What are you talking about? Who cares? What are you talking about?" Right? But now I get it. Having been introduced to horror games, right? So it has kind of brought me to other games that maybe aren't horror games, but I can be like, okay, well, it's not scary, but it still has a great atmosphere. I understand how important that could be. Let me check it out. Yeah. Right. And so I think it's led me to other genres. Detective. Oh, wow. Okay. That never interested me before, but if it gets me thinking, and it gets me, a lot of horror games are kind of puzzle games, right? I can still jump into that, because of my experience with horror games.
Absolutely.
Atmosphere, it'll make or break your game for me. So I completely understand that.
Maybe we could each just give let's talk about maybe something for the Halloween season. We got a lot of people out there who love just to have the wind blowing, have the leaves changing color, and curl up on the couch and play something a little bit spooky. I would say, hey, if you're looking for something like that and you want to just ease into this Halloween season, check out Bloodborne if you haven't played it. I don't know if you've ever played that, Glasses Guy, but it is just a really good Victorian kind of horror atmosphere, great gameplay, and it's not that old, so it still kind of holds up in the looks department.
Yeah, Bloodborne's a fantastic game. It's not necessarily too scary. I think it's pretty action filled, but in some ways, it actually might be more of a I mentioned Alien as a good kind of introduction to horror gaming. This is actually maybe even in some ways better because it's not particularly supposed to be super scary or whatnot. But if you've never played anything horror, you can start getting into that atmosphere and kind of work your way into actually less action, more scary along the way.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with one that's a little unpopular. I liked it fine when I played it. The Blair Witch game from several years back. I enjoyed it fine. It's got a pretty bad ending, I'll admit. But as far as atmosphere, being lost in the woods, weird supernatural shenanigans ensue. I dug it in that sense, at least.
I think I've actually heard Glasses Guy opinion on that game before over tacos one time. So.
Ooh, the truth comes out over tacos. Is he not a fan?
It's no, it's a solid game.
Okay, the ending straight is bad. I won't even try and defend that. But everything for the first 2/3 of it, I liked pretty solid.
I would say that's pretty fair.
Well, there we go. It's fair.
All right, best for last, Glasses Guy. What are you saying out there to, anybody, or just what you think is a great game that maybe people haven't experienced in the horror department?
Yeah, I would say one that's fairly well known, but it's not 100% mainstream. I believe it started on PC and then became popular, moved to consoles later. I won't give too much about it, but it's kind of this. It's one of these ones that you play and then afterwards you kind of sit there and go, what is the meaning of life? What am I even doing here? It's a game called Soma.
Yeah.
And I won't give too much about it. It definitely is a horror game. It's not necessarily bloody or gory or whatnot. It is has a fair amount of horror and is pretty scary. Not the scariest. It's not something only a veteran can play necessarily, a horror game veteran. But it definitely is very atmospheric. And afterwards, you kind of contemplate, what is even the meaning of my life? What does it mean to even exist?
Interesting. I don't know. Yeah, can Ratnado handle an identity crisis at this moment? I don't know, but maybe I'll check it out.
That's quite the recommendation you got there. I don't know if anyone's gonna take you up on it, but
no, they will. Somebody will, because that sounds amazing. Somebody who's gonna I do want to question my life. I'm intrigued. I've never played it before.
It sounds unique. It sounds right up a certain person's alley. But well, I just gotta say, Ratnado, they say opposites attract. So you know what that makes Glasses Guy?
What's that?
The best guest.
Oh man, and there's our title. Great. So much. Thank you so much, Glasses Guy. We appreciate you taking time out of your very busy day. And just let us know, is there anything else you want to shout out? Any projects or anything you want people to know about? You don't have to, but just, if you do.
I'm a pretty simple guy. No project to shout out. I'm happy to have been a guest on the podcast. A lot of fun.
All right. Thanks so much for being here. As always, I am Team Ratnado, currently on hiatus, but I am just going to be somewhere by October with better internet so I can get back to streaming and get back into those October night spoopies. Thanks for being patient with me, everyone. I will have something soon. I am here, as always, with my co-host...
Spook Cobbler. What'd you hear?
I
said Squat Cobbler. Yeah.
I feel like I'm having
what I thought.
An identity crisis right now with our guest.
You must have played Soma recently. Yeah, I'm gonna be missing the October night spookers. I wish there was a way to have spoopies all month. Ratnado. I guess we'll just have to make do with regular old Scrollies throughout October, everyone, especially next week.
Yeah. So
that's too bad, but yeah, I've been Squat Cobbler, and we're joined by our special guest this episode,
Glasses Guy.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Goodbye, everyone, and have a great week.
See ya.
See you guys. Can you guys give me the lowdown on the whole Link's Awakening controversy with Catt?
All right, Nato, I'll let you handle this.
She's got a lot of dirt on us, so she might actually bury this. This could be the last episode of Scrollies. Okay, so she says that Link's Awakening is not a Zelda game.
Yeah, okay, I definitely have. I have heard that specifically from her, and basically only her. Cat claims to be a hardcore Zelda fan.
I mean, there's Goombas, there's Kirby in it. If that doesn't spell Zelda to me, I don't know what does.
I disagree completely with her, because it's just like it's Link and it's a game. The gameplay is there. How is this not?
I had no idea that she had talked to you guys about it. I thought it was only to me, and it sounds like I'm in good company, because I think it's a fantastic game.
Yeah, and that's on record.
Yeah, it's also canonically a dream, and I mean, name a single dream you've ever had where something weird doesn't show up. So, hey.
Well, I guess her first real experience with Zelda games was Ocarina of Time. So, that's going to shade you for the rest of your life.
The most Zelda game to ever Zelda, with all the Zelda things in it. So, yeah.
Funny you say that, because it's so true. Because I don't even think she likes Link to the Past.
Yeah, probably not.
It's like if it's not at least Ocarina of Time or forward, then it sucks. It's not a good Zelda game, or it's not even a Zelda game. I mean, I think Ocarina of Time and all the ones moving forward are great too.
Yeah.
But I also love Link to the Past and Link's Awakening. I think they're fantastic.
Same.
It's got to have the Gorons. The Gorons make or break the Zelda series.